The morning sun rose over Falcon Ridge Military Academy, casting long shadows across the perfectly trimmed parade grounds. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and polished boots. For most cadets, it was just another Monday, a routine march through drills, inspections, and lectures. But today, a new presence would quietly disrupt the carefully maintained hierarchy of the academy. Alina Ward stepped off the transport bus with a purposeful stride, her black boots tapping sharply against the asphalt. She carried a single duffel over her shoulder, her uniform crisp and impeccably clean, every insignia perfectly placed. Cadets walking past her glanced up, their murmurs barely disguised. Something about her drew attention, though she said nothing, and her expression remained calm, unreadable. "Who is she?" whispered one cadet to another, craning to get a better look at the newcomer. The transfer list had noted a new female cadet, but few expected the quiet confidence she carried. She wasn't fidgeting like a nervous teenager. She wasn't glancing around trying to figure out her surroundings. Alina's eyes swept over the academy grounds like she had been there before. Every movement was precise, every glance calculated. She looked prepared. Cadet Major Briggs, known throughout the academy for his arrogance and need to assert dominance, was immediately intrigued and annoyed. He leaned against the wall by the barracks, arms crossed, his face set in a sneer. "Looks like we've got a rookie trying to act like she belongs," he muttered to his closest cronies. "Let's see how long it lasts." Alina approached her assigned platoon, Alpha Company, where a group of cadets were gathered for morning formation. She fell in line, her movements smooth and practiced, seamlessly adjusting to the rigid rhythm of military precision. The platoon commander's eyes flicked toward her, then quickly back to his clipboard, seemingly unaware that a storm had quietly entered their ranks. As drills began, Alina's attention was divided. She noted the hierarchy, the cadets' mannerisms, the subtle cracks in the chain of command. A few of the upperclassmen whispered amongst themselves, sneering at her quiet demeanor. "She looks too clean," one muttered, "like she's never had to lift anything heavier than a book." But Alina wasn't there to impress. Her mission was deeper, far more important. On the surface, she was a transfer student, sent to blend in, observe, and evaluate. No one knew that beneath her civilian guise, she was Lieutenant Commander Alina Ward, a Navy SEAL, trained to endure what no ordinary cadet could survive, capable of neutralizing threats with precision and silence. Her real objective was to study the Academy's culture, identify weaknesses in leadership, and determine whether the next generation of cadets could handle real-world pressure. Her calmness unnerved the upperclassmen immediately. They were used to being in control, accustomed to cornering and intimidating new arrivals to assert dominance. Yet here was someone who refused to react, someone who didn't flinch or argue, someone who watched with an intensity that made even the bravest cadets hesitate. By mid-morning, whispers began circulating through Alpha Company. "She's different," one cadet said. "I don't know what it is, but she's not scared of anything." Briggs scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "All rookies talk like that until they break," he said. "Watch me put her in her place." The first subtle test came during basic physical drills. The cadets ran laps around the parade ground while performing standard obstacle exercises. Alina moved with a quiet efficiency that drew curious stares. She didn't sprint recklessly. She measured every step, conserving energy while effortlessly clearing walls, crawling under nets, and scaling rope climbs. Her form was flawless, her timing precise. For an untrained observer, she might have seemed merely athletic. For anyone paying closer attention, it was clear she was operating on a completely different level. By lunch, Briggs had grown impatient. He cornered her behind the cafeteria, flanked by two of his cronies. "Hey, rookie," he called, his voice dripping with mockery. "You think you can just walk in here and act like you belong? Get out of here before you embarrass yourself." Alina didn't respond immediately. She sized him up quietly, noting the patterns in his stance, the way he leaned into intimidation, and the subtle shifts in the positions of his two companions. She remained calm, her face serene, betraying nothing. To the casual observer, she seemed almost fragile, but every fiber of her being was alert, every muscle ready to react in an instant if necessary. Briggs shoved her lightly, expecting her to flinch. She didn't. Instead, she stepped back deliberately, maintaining perfect balance. The motion was slight, almost imperceptible, but it communicated an unspoken warning. She was not afraid, and she could defend herself without effort. The surrounding cadets sensed the tension. A hush fell over the small crowd, as if the air itself had become thick with anticipation. Some cadets exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the way. Alina's eyes met Briggs's, calm yet unwavering. It was a silent challenge, one that required no words but carried the weight of authority and experience far beyond her apparent age. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch period, Alina gave a polite nod and walked away, leaving Briggs fuming. He turned to his friends, jaw clenched. "Something off about her," he muttered. "I don't like it." As she moved across the campus, Alina mentally catalogued the interactions of the day. Every shove, every sneer, every whispered insult had been data, information she would use later. She had observed leadership dynamics, group hierarchies, and individual weaknesses. To the untrained eye, she was just a new cadet trying to fit in. To herself, she was gathering intelligence for a mission that could affect the Academy's entire future. By the end of the first day, it was already clear that Falcon Ridge had underestimated the new girl. And Alina Ward, in her quiet, methodical way, had begun to stake her claim, not as a threat, but as a force no one could ignore. The whispers would continue, the glances would follow her, and soon enough, the cadets who thought they could intimidate her would realize that they were dealing with someone far beyond their comprehension. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the academy grounds. For the cadets, it was another day completed, another routine endured. For Alina Ward, it was only the beginning. The real tests had yet to come, and she was ready. The afternoon sun glared harshly across the academy's parade grounds, bouncing off polished boots and the metal insignia of cadets marching in perfect unison. Yet the rhythm of training felt off to some, because today, Alina Ward's presence had already unsettled the usually unshakable Alpha Company. Whispers and sideways glances followed her every move, their eyes betraying curiosity, suspicion, and a creeping fear she could not yet openly confirm. Cadet Major Briggs had spent the morning stewing. He couldn't shake the unsettling sense that the new girl wasn't what she appeared to be. Her calm, measured movements, the way she adjusted her posture to conserve energy during drills, the subtle glances she cast when no one was looking, it all screamed experience, not rookie naivety. But how to confront her? How to assert dominance without exposing himself to humiliation? As the final afternoon drill concluded, Briggs saw his opportunity behind the barracks. Most cadets were moving toward the mess hall, only a few lingered near the shaded walkway. "This is perfect," he muttered to his companions, two of his closest friends. "We'll show her she doesn't belong here." Alina, meanwhile, moved quietly, carrying her bag over one shoulder, a subtle air of ease masking her alertness. She was aware of the plotting from the corner of her eye but showed no reaction. Years of military training had taught her that reading the intentions of others without revealing your own was often more powerful than a direct confrontation. Briggs stepped into her path, his swagger more performative than confident. "Hey, rookie," he said, voice dripping with mock authority. "You're in my area. Move along before you embarrass yourself." Alina paused, offering only a polite nod. Her tone was measured and calm. "I believe I'm where I'm supposed to be," she said, her voice soft but carrying an unshakable weight that made Briggs hesitate for just a fraction of a second. "Did she just talk back?" muttered one of his cronies. "She's not supposed to." The air thickened as Briggs's impatience surfaced. He shoved her lightly, expecting resistance, expecting to provoke fear or anger. Instead, Alina remained steady. Her bag shifted slightly on her shoulder, but she did not flinch, did not stumble. To the casual observer, she might have seemed delicate. To anyone trained to read body language, she radiated control, the kind born from discipline and countless high-stakes scenarios. Briggs narrowed his eyes. "You think you're tough, we'll see about that." He gestured to his two companions, who stepped forward, flanking her on either side. The three of them formed a semicircle, confident that intimidation would work. But Alina's stance didn't change. Her feet were firmly planted, her shoulders relaxed but ready, and her gaze shifted slightly, scanning the perimeter, cataloging their positions, noting every angle and vulnerability. She had been in far more dangerous confrontations than this, fights where the stakes were life and death, and she had survived them all. The cadets leaned in closer, smirking, attempting to overwhelm her with sheer bravado. One of them reached for her bag, trying to yank it from her shoulder. Alina's reflexes were instantaneous. She didn't need to fight aggressively, just enough to make her point. With a subtle twist, she shifted her weight, guiding his hand harmlessly away while her other hand steadied the bag. The movement was almost invisible to anyone not paying close attention. Briggs's eyes widened. "What the?" Alina's voice remained calm. "I'd advise reconsidering your approach." The subtle firmness in her tone, combined with the precise control in her movements, caused a ripple of unease among the cadets. A few began to whisper, "She's not just a rookie, she's something else." The tension escalated when Briggs attempted a more aggressive shove, intending to push her out of the area entirely. Alina didn't resist in the traditional sense. Instead, she used a small, practiced pivot to unbalance him, redirecting his momentum harmlessly to the side. He stumbled slightly, recovering quickly, but the confidence in his smirk faltered. Cadet whispers turned into low murmurs of shock. "Did you see that?" one said. "She just moved him without touching him." "Impossible," muttered another. Briggs was furious, his face red. He lunged again, this time aiming to grab her arm and force her into retreat. Alina's body reacted instinctively. With fluid precision, she caught his wrist, twisted, and gently redirected his energy, pinning him momentarily against the wall without causing injury. Her movements were deliberate, almost elegant, but carried undeniable authority. The other cadets froze. Silence blanketed the alley behind the barracks. For the first time, they weren't sure if they should intervene or retreat. Every instinct screamed that this new girl was not only untouchable but far more capable than anyone there dared imagine. Alina released Briggs immediately, stepping back with calm composure. "I will not escalate this," she said quietly, "but I also will not be intimidated." Briggs staggered, taken aback. He wasn't used to being matched, let alone dominated, by someone he assumed was inexperienced. A wave of confusion swept over him. Who is she really? He wondered. As the bell for the next session echoed across the academy grounds, Alina adjusted her bag and walked past the cadets, leaving Briggs and his companions frozen in disbelief. Her measured pace, calm demeanor, and silent authority left a lasting impression. No one saw the slight smirk that crossed her face. This was exactly the reaction she had anticipated. Later, during the briefing in the classroom, Briggs couldn't shake the incident. He replayed the encounter in his mind, each movement, each word, each subtle pause. It unnerved him more than he cared to admit. Around him, other cadets whispered, their voices tinged with awe and nervous excitement. "She's amazing," one said. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Meanwhile, Alina sat quietly at the back of the classroom, her expression neutral, eyes scanning the room. She wasn't here for accolades or attention. She was observing, noting reactions, measuring character, and evaluating potential threats, not just physical but psychological. Every cadet's response to confrontation, stress, and authority would later become part of her report. By the end of the afternoon, the atmosphere within Alpha Company had shifted. Cadets who once sneered now hesitated when glancing her way. Briggs, once brimming with confidence, found himself questioning his assumptions. The new girl was no ordinary cadet, and the subtle, almost invisible power she wielded had begun to ripple through the ranks. As the sun dipped behind the hills surrounding Falcon Ridge, Alina walked alone toward the barracks. Her mind catalogued the day's events, noting who had shown arrogance, who had displayed fear, and who might pose challenges in the future. She didn't need to react aggressively to assert authority. Her presence alone had accomplished what years of military training could not teach ordinary cadets. That night, as she lay in her assigned room, Alina reflected on the first day. She knew the cadets would test her again. They always did. But she was ready, prepared not only to defend herself but to teach lessons they would never forget. Falcon Ridge had welcomed her under false assumptions. By the time the academy fully understood who she was, it would be too late to challenge her. Tomorrow the tests would continue. The confrontations would escalate. And Alina Ward, Lieutenant Commander and Navy SEAL, would quietly observe, calculating each step with the precision that had defined her career. The cadets had thought they cornered a mere new girl. In reality, they had only glimpsed the surface of a storm waiting to unfold. The morning sun spilled across Falcon Ridge Academy's sprawling training field, illuminating rows of cadets stretching, jogging in formation, and preparing for the day's grueling physical exercises. The air smelled of sweat, freshly cut grass, and determination. For most cadets, it was just another day in the academy's punishing routine. But for Alina Ward, it was another opportunity to observe, adapt, and prepare for the inevitable challenges ahead. Alpha Company lined up, standing at attention under the watchful eyes of drill instructor Carlson, a veteran who demanded perfection in every movement. Cadet Major Briggs scanned the line, his gaze lingering on Alina. The previous day's encounter had rattled him more than he cared to admit. There had been something about the calm, unyielding confidence in her stance, a quiet authority that unnerved even the boldest cadets. "Today," Carlson bellowed, "you will run the obstacle course, complete the climbing wall, crawl under nets, and finish with endurance laps. Fail and you repeat. No excuses." Briggs smirked, confident that Alina, the new girl, would falter early. "Watch this," he muttered to his cronies, gesturing subtly as he anticipated her struggles. "She's going to break in the first 50 meters." The whistle blew. Cadets surged forward in unison. Alina moved with quiet efficiency, matching the rhythm of the group yet packing herself carefully. Her eyes scanned each obstacle before her, analyzing angles, distances, and the optimal path. Years of Navy SEAL training had ingrained an almost instinctive understanding of efficiency, balance, and endurance. What appeared effortless to an observer was the product of countless hours of rigorous, high-stakes preparation. The first obstacle, a series of horizontal bars requiring upper body strength, had many cadets struggling. Arms trembled, grips faltered, and one cadet even fell awkwardly onto the mat below. Alina approached the bars with fluid grace. Her grip was firm but controlled. She swung smoothly from bar to bar, momentum perfect, landing lightly on the other side. Briggs watched, mouth slightly agape. "She's fast." Next came the rope climb. Cadets scrambled, pulling with visible strain, some nearly losing their hold mid-ascent. Alina's movements were precise. She ascended with a steady rhythm, using her legs efficiently to conserve upper body strength, reaching the top without breaking a sweat. A few cadets whispered to each other in disbelief. "I've never seen anyone move like that." Then came the crawling net, a low-hanging obstacle forcing cadets to crawl on all fours under a tangled web of ropes. Most cadets dragged themselves, brushing against the rough surface, their faces grimacing in exertion. Alina slid beneath the net like water, her movements silent and fluid. She didn't rush, yet she emerged ahead of most cadets, already halfway to the next challenge. Briggs gritted his teeth. He had anticipated at least some struggle on her part, some sign of fatigue, but she showed none. Instead, she appeared calm, measured, and almost effortless in her execution. The other cadets began noticing the impossible synchronicity of her movements, the way she flowed through each obstacle as if choreographed. Whispers spread. "She's not human." The final endurance lap approached, the stretch that usually broke cadets mentally and physically. They ran in tight formation, arms pumping, faces glistening with sweat. Cadets gasped, stumbling over one another, some faltering, their lungs burning. Alina maintained a perfect pace, breathing evenly, her stride powerful and unwavering. Briggs' confidence wavered, replaced with a growing unease. Every glance he cast her way revealed the truth. She was untouchable. Midway through the lap, a cadet attempted to overtake her aggressively, attempting to assert dominance by forcing her into the outer lane. Alina didn't resist in an obvious way. Instead, she subtly adjusted her position, sidestepping efficiently, keeping pace while forcing the cadet slightly off balance. He stumbled, startled by the unseen precision of her movements. By the time they completed the endurance lap, the other cadets were gasping, clutching their knees, drenched in sweat and completely spent. Alina's uniform was clean, her breathing steady, her posture erect. Drill instructor Carlson's eyes narrowed, impressed despite himself. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath, scribbling notes on his clipboard. Briggs, humiliated but unwilling to admit it openly, approached her after the exercise. "All right, rookie," he said, forcing a sneer. "You got lucky. That was just one day. You won't last a week here." Alina turned to face him, calm and measured. "I'm not here for luck," she said. Her words were quiet but carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "And I don't intend to compete for dominance. I'm here to observe, adapt, and perform as expected." Briggs opened his mouth, but no retort came. He had tried intimidation, brute force, and now sarcasm, yet none had affected her. The quiet confidence radiating from Alina was unnerving, almost alien to him. Around them, other cadets glanced at her with a mix of fear and awe, realizing they had underestimated the new girl. Later that afternoon, during downtime, cadets huddled in small groups, whispering. "She didn't even break a sweat," one murmured. "I've never seen anyone move like that in my life." "I saw the rope climb," said another. "She didn't just climb, it was like watching someone perform a ritual. Perfect technique, perfect timing." Even Briggs' cronies couldn't hide their unease. "She's not just athletic," one admitted reluctantly. "She's disciplined, trained." Alina, sitting quietly by herself, observed the reactions without acknowledgement. She was cataloging data, how cadets reacted to unexpected competence, how arrogance and hierarchy influenced behavior, and which individuals posed potential challenges. Each detail was important for her mission, a small thread in the larger tapestry she was weaving to understand the Academy's strengths and weaknesses. As evening approached, drill instructor Carlson gathered the cadets. "Today's exercises exposed weaknesses," he said, pointing to tired, faltering cadets. But one cadet stood out. "I want everyone to learn from observation, not just brute force. Strength is nothing without technique, precision, and composure." His gaze lingered on Alina briefly before returning to the rest of the group. Briggs clenched his fists. His pride had taken a beating. The day that was supposed to humiliate the new girl had instead unveiled a truth he couldn't ignore. She was exceptional, beyond anything he had encountered at the Academy. And the more he tried to rationalize it, the more unnerved he became. That night, as Alina prepared for bed in the barracks, she reflected on the day. Every glance, every whispered comment, every challenge she had faced was part of a pattern she had anticipated. The cadets' arrogance was predictable, their methods unsophisticated. She had not yet revealed her full capability, and she had no intention of doing so prematurely. Tomorrow promised new tests, new confrontations, and more opportunities to assess not just physical ability but character, leadership, and resilience. The cadets had begun to suspect there was more to the new girl than met the eye, but none could imagine the depth of experience, training, and skill she carried beneath the unassuming surface. Alina closed her eyes, calm and composed, fully aware that the next day would push her observations further. Falcon Ridge Academy had entered her world, unaware that every move they made, Every attempt at dominance had already been noted, cataloged, and filed, and she would be ready to meet them every step of the way. By the end of the first 3 days, it would become clear to the cadets that Alina Ward was no ordinary recruit. She was a force they could neither intimidate nor outmatch, someone whose quiet authority would shift the dynamics of Alpha Company forever. And while Briggs and his cronies clung to fragile confidence, the reality of Alina's presence loomed like a shadow they could not escape. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the academy grounds, and the air had grown warm and heavy. Cadets moved between classes and training sessions, chatting and joking, but a certain tension lingered near the barracks. Word of the new girl had spread through Alpha Company like wildfire. Cadet Major Briggs, still smarting from Alina Ward's flawless performance during the obstacle course, was determined to regain his wounded pride. "Today," he muttered to his cronies, "we corner her, make her leave. No excuses, show her she's just another rookie." They trailed Alina as she carried her duffel toward the gym. Unaware, she remained focused, her gaze scanning the surroundings with calm precision. Every step, every subtle movement, revealed nothing of her awareness of the trap being set. Years of Navy SEAL training had taught her to read intent before it was ever acted upon. She could feel their presence behind her like a pulse in the air, but she did not panic, not even slightly. As she approached the corner near the gym's rear entrance, Briggs stepped forward with exaggerated confidence. "Hey, rookie," he called, his tone sharper than usual. "This area is off-limits for you. You're not welcome here. Get out of here before someone teaches you a lesson." Alina paused, her hand lightly resting on the strap of her duffel, her body perfectly balanced. "I don't believe I'm in anyone's way," she said evenly. Her tone was soft but carried a calm authority that made Briggs falter for the briefest second. He didn't allow hesitation. With a shove meant to intimidate, he tried to force her backward. Alina barely shifted, absorbing the energy of the push with a subtle step back, her footing firm. The effort required minimal strength, an effortless redirection of his momentum, but to the cadets watching, it was mesmerizing. "See, she's weak," Briggs shouted at his companions. "Just wait, she'll crack." Alina's eyes flicked briefly to the surrounding cadets, observing reactions. She cataloged their hesitation, their growing unease. Years of high-stakes operations had trained her to read fear, arrogance, and calculation in others. She noted who might react rashly, who might try to intervene, and who would simply watch. One of Briggs' cronies lunged at her bag, attempting to wrestle it from her shoulder. Alina's body reacted instantly, almost instinctively. With a smooth pivot and a subtle twist, she guided his hand away, maintaining perfect balance. The movement was so precise it seemed choreographed, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. Briggs' face paled slightly. "What the hell?" he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "You should reconsider your approach," Alina said quietly, her calm voice cutting through the tension. It carried a weight far beyond what Briggs had anticipated. The other cadets froze. Whispers rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, their eyes wide. No one expected the new girl to handle the situation with such effortless control. For the first time, Briggs felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. "Time to teach you a real lesson," Briggs snarled, pushing forward again. This time he aimed to grab her, to force her out entirely. Alina's body reacted with flawless precision. She sidestepped slightly, unbalancing him, then guided his momentum harmlessly toward the wall. He stumbled but didn't fall. It was not about hurting him. It was about demonstrating control, and she had done so effortlessly. The cadets around them gasped. Some whispered under their breath, "She's not just athletic, she's trained." Briggs tried again, desperation creeping into his movements. "Stop playing games," he shouted. "You're just a girl." Alina's eyes locked onto his. "I am not playing games," she said evenly, "and I am not to be underestimated." Her voice was calm, unwavering, yet the authority behind it made Briggs hesitate. She didn't need to shout or strike. Her presence alone conveyed a silent command. Suddenly, one of Briggs' companions made a move, trying to flank her from the side. Alina pivoted smoothly, redirecting his momentum, ensuring he didn't touch her while guiding him slightly off balance. The subtlety of her movements was mesmerizing, fluid, precise, and controlled. Every motion had a purpose. There was no wasted effort. Briggs, increasingly flustered, stumbled backward. He had intended to dominate her, to humiliate her, but instead, the tables had turned. His arrogance was crumbling under the weight of her calm authority. Around them, the other cadets whispered and exchanged wide-eyed glances. The new girl was proving to be far beyond what any of them had imagined. "Enough," Alina said quietly, stepping back and adjusting her duffel. Her calm composure contrasted sharply with Briggs' flustered, red-faced frustration. "I will not escalate this further, but I also will not be intimidated." Briggs glared at her, fists clenched, but he knew he had lost the confrontation. The subtle power she exuded was undeniable. Even his cronies hesitated, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. The lesson had been delivered without a single overtly aggressive strike, yet it resonated more than any blow ever could. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the session, Alina walked past Briggs and his companions, her movements steady, deliberate, and unhurried. She left a trail of awe and disbelief in her wake. Behind her, the cadets stood frozen, realizing for the first time that their assumptions about the new girl were entirely wrong. Later in the classroom, whispers continued. Cadets replayed the confrontation in their minds, still stunned. "Did you see how she moved?" one asked. "It was like she was controlling everything around her." "She didn't even break a sweat," muttered another. "It's impossible." Even Briggs' closest allies couldn't hide their unease. "She's disciplined, experienced," one admitted reluctantly. "She's not just some rookie." Alina remained quiet, taking notes in her own mind. She catalogued each reaction, each hesitation, each failed attempt at intimidation. Her observations weren't just about physical ability. They were about psychology, leadership, and group dynamics. Every cadet's behavior in response to authority and pressure was critical information for her mission. As evening approached, Alina returned to the barracks. She reflected on the day, reviewing the encounter and the subtle lessons she had imparted. The cadets had tested her, confident in their ability to dominate. Instead, they had been met with precision, calm, and control. Their arrogance had been exposed, their assumptions shattered. And all of this had been done without raising her voice, without resorting to overt aggression. She knew the cadets would try again. They always did. But Alina Ward was ready. Her mission wasn't just about surviving their tests. It was about teaching them lessons they would never forget, lessons that extended far beyond the walls of Falcon Ridge Academy. Briggs, meanwhile, sat alone on the steps near the gym, replaying the events over and over. His confidence had been shattered, replaced with an uneasy realization. The new girl was not who she appeared to be, and as he watched her silhouette disappear in the fading light, he understood. He had underestimated her entirely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, and more opportunities for Alina to observe, assess, and lead. The cadets had thought they could corner a weak rookie. They were wrong. She was no ordinary cadet. She was a Navy SEAL trained to endure, adapt, and dominate, not through brute force, but through precision, control, and intelligence. And the Academy was about to learn just how formidable she truly was. The next morning, a subtle tension lingered over Falcon Ridge Academy like a charged wire. The cadets of Alpha Company whispered as they moved through formation, their eyes frequently flicking toward Alina Ward. Her presence alone had unsettled the usual pecking order, and no one could quite reconcile her calm composure with the extraordinary skill and control she had demonstrated during the previous day's confrontation. Cadet Major Briggs, still smarting from being publicly outmaneuvered, felt a burning need to assert dominance. He watched Alina closely, waiting for a sign of weakness he could exploit. But she gave him nothing, only the quiet, measured gaze of someone who had long ago mastered fear and conflict. The day began with routine drills, but an urgent summons interrupted the schedule. Drill instructor Carlson barked orders, directing all cadets to their classrooms. Alina received a discreet note from the academy office. She was to report to the commandant immediately. She walked calmly through the halls, her duffel at her side, eyes scanning the architecture and cadets around her. Her intuition told her that today would be pivotal. The moment had arrived when her true identity, long concealed, would be revealed. Every step was deliberate, her posture impeccable, projecting the same authority she had carried in every challenge thus far. In the commandant's office, Brigadier General Harold Simmons, a stern yet fair leader, waited behind his polished oak desk. He motioned for her to sit, eyes sharp, curiosity mixed with respect. "Lieutenant Ward," he began, his tone measured, "the Academy has received reports, unusual reports." Alina seated herself calmly. "I understand, sir," she replied, her voice steady, unwavering. She placed her duffel at her side and opened a small folder containing her official orders. "I am prepared to provide all relevant credentials." Simmons raised an eyebrow. "Let's see them." From the folder, Alina produced an identification card and a sealed envelope marked with the insignia of the Department of the Navy. She handed them to the general, who studied them closely, his eyes narrowing as he examined the fine print and encoded certifications. "Navy SEAL," he muttered under his breath, flipping through the documentation. "Lieutenant Commander, decorated, multiple commendations, undercover assignment at Falcon Ridge." The office seemed to shrink around Briggs, who had been called in as a witness to the reports. His jaw dropped as the reality sank in. The cadets who had once mocked her, cornered her, and underestimated her now watched, stunned, as the full truth emerged. Alina Ward was not a rookie cadet at all. She was one of the Navy's most elite operators, sent to observe and assess, not as a student but as an evaluator of character, discipline, and leadership within the academy. I don't understand," Briggs stammered. She's one of us." His voice faltered as he struggled to comprehend the discrepancy between the petite, quiet cadet in the hallway and the decorated SEAL before him. "No, Cadet Briggs," General Simmons said firmly, his voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. "She is not one of you. She is Lieutenant Commander Alina Ward, an operative tasked with a critical mission here. Your behavior toward her yesterday was inappropriate." Alina remained silent, composed. She had anticipated this moment, but she allowed the commandant to handle the delivery of the revelation. She didn't need to assert herself further. The evidence spoke volumes. Briggs' face turned red, a mix of embarrassment, disbelief, and grudging awe. Around him, other cadets exchanged whispered comments, their earlier mockery replaced with uncertainty. She's a SEAL," one cadet whispered. "The new girl." "Yes," General Simmons confirmed. "Lieutenant Ward's presence here is part of an undercover assessment of the Academy's discipline, leadership, and operational readiness. The fact that she was cornered and mocked reflects poorly on the individuals involved, and frankly on the culture here." A heavy silence settled over the room. Briggs' previous confidence had evaporated, replaced with a gnawing awareness that he had been completely outmatched, not just physically but mentally. The quiet authority and skill that Alina had displayed were not mere luck or athleticism. They were the result of years of intense, high-risk training. Alina finally spoke, her tone calm, measured, and commanding. "My purpose here is to observe and report. I am not here to embarrass anyone, nor am I here to assert dominance unnecessarily. But I will not allow disrespect, intimidation, or incompetence to go unnoted. Leadership and discipline are earned, not assumed." The room absorbed her words. Cadets who had witnessed her performance, and their own failed attempts to dominate her, felt the weight of truth settling in. This was no ordinary new cadet. This was someone who had survived environments far harsher than Falcon Ridge, someone who had operated under life-and-death pressure, someone whose authority could not be questioned lightly. Briggs attempted to regain some semblance of control, but his words faltered. "Sir, I didn't realize." "You did realize," Simmons interrupted sharply. "You just assumed weakness based on appearance and youth. That assumption is what brought us here. Lieutenant Ward's capabilities are exceptional, and the Academy will benefit from her presence, if you and your peers are willing to learn from this experience rather than resist it." Alina's eyes met Briggs again. There was no anger, no gloating, only the quiet intensity of someone who had long mastered control and consequence. Briggs' throat tightened as he swallowed, realizing the magnitude of the lesson he was receiving. As the revelation sank in, the dynamics within the room shifted dramatically. Cadets who had ridiculed her now looked at her with a mixture of fear, awe, and a grudging respect. Briggs, who had sought to assert dominance, was confronted with a truth that shook him to his core. The new girl was not only untouchable, she had the authority, skill, and experience to expose the Academy's weaknesses. General Simmons leaned back, his expression solemn but approving. "Lieutenant Ward, I trust you will guide the cadets where necessary without compromising the mission. And Cadet Briggs," he said, locking eyes with him, "I expect you to reflect on your actions and adjust your behavior accordingly. This academy is about growth, discipline, and respect. Today's events must be a turning point." Alina nodded subtly. "Understood, sir." Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions swirling around Briggs and the other cadets. Her mission was just beginning, but she had already achieved a crucial objective. She had unveiled the truth and forced the cadets to confront their assumptions about power, skill, and respect. As she left the office, the cadets whispered among themselves. "She's incredible," one said. "All this time we thought she was a rookie. She's a SEAL." "She's not just strong," another admitted. "She's disciplined, precise, dangerous." Briggs, walking silently behind them, clenched his fists but remained silent. Pride and embarrassment warred within him. He had underestimated Alina Ward, and the realization burned hotter than any physical exertion he had experienced during training. Outside, the academy grounds seemed different somehow. Alina's presence had shifted the atmosphere. Cadets moved with more caution, more respect, and a heightened awareness that hierarchy and arrogance could no longer dictate their interactions. The revelation of her true identity had exposed vulnerabilities, challenged assumptions, and set a new standard for excellence. For Alina, the day marked a significant milestone. She had revealed the truth without confrontation, commanded respect without threats, and forced the cadets to reconsider what leadership, skill, and discipline truly meant. Yet, she knew the mission was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, further testing the cadets' resolve, teamwork, and capacity to learn from someone whose abilities were beyond their comprehension. By evening, as she reviewed her notes in the quiet of the barracks, Alina reflected on the events of the day. The cadets had begun to see her as more than a new girl. They were beginning to grasp, if only faintly, that she was a force whose authority could not be questioned lightly. And as Falcon Ridge Academy settled into the evening, one fact was undeniable. The dynamics of Alpha Company and the lessons of the academy itself had forever changed. Alina Ward, Lieutenant Commander and Navy SEAL, had revealed herself. And for the cadets who had mocked her, cornered her, and doubted her abilities, the revelation was only the beginning of a humbling and transformative journey. The morning sun bathed Falcon Ridge Academy in a golden light, but the cadets of Alpha Company were anything but bright-eyed. Whispers circulated through the ranks like wildfire. The revelation of Alina Ward's true identity had left them stunned, unsure, and oddly nervous. No longer could arrogance and intimidation guide their interactions. Every action was now measured against the silent, formidable presence of a Navy SEAL. Cadet Major Briggs, pride wounded yet unwilling to admit defeat, gathered his team near the training field. His jaw was tight, his eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty. "Today," he muttered, "we regroup and show we're still in charge." But even as he spoke, a seed of doubt had taken root. The cadets weren't sure how to follow his lead, not after witnessing Alina's skill, control, and composure firsthand. Alina arrived at the training ground with calm confidence, her black boots clicking sharply against the asphalt. Her uniform remained impeccable, her posture flawless. She carried no bag, only a clipboard, and her gaze swept the cadets, cataloging their readiness, confidence, and underlying hesitation. Every detail mattered, and she noted even the smallest shift in body language, every nervous glance, and every silent challenge that remained unresolved. "Good morning, Alpha Company," Alina said, her voice carrying authority without arrogance. "Today, we focus on leadership under pressure. Physical skill alone will not suffice. You must learn to anticipate, communicate, and adapt. Those who rely solely on aggression or intimidation will fail. I will be observing, mentoring, and correcting. Are we clear?" A chorus of murmurs swept through the cadets. Briggs stiffened. He had expected resistance or sarcasm, but the weight of Alina's presence left them uncharacteristically silent. "Yes, ma'am," they said, almost in unison, voices carrying both awe and reluctance. Alina directed them to a new set of challenges designed to test both physical capability and leadership. The cadets were split into teams, each assigned to navigate an obstacle course blindfolded, relying solely on verbal guidance from their leaders. The twist: only one cadet per team could see the obstacles, while the others had to trust instructions entirely. Briggs assumed command of his team immediately, barking orders and attempting to assert dominance. "Left, right, hurry," he shouted, his voice rising with frustration as his team faltered. Alina observed quietly, noting the breakdowns in communication and the growing tension among the cadets. When it was Alina's turn, she stepped forward with calm authority. Her team members were unsure, eyes wide, but they followed her lead instinctively. "One step at a time," she said softly, yet every word carried weight. "Trust each other. Listen. Move as a unit." The difference was immediate. Alina's cadence was steady, her instructions clear and concise. She didn't raise her voice unnecessarily. She didn't force compliance through intimidation. Instead, she fostered trust, demonstrating that leadership was about guidance, not coercion. Her team moved fluidly through the obstacles, even blindfolded, executing maneuvers that Briggs' team had failed repeatedly. Briggs watched, fists clenched, as Alina's team completed the course flawlessly. The cadets whispered among themselves, some in disbelief, some in awe. How does she do that?" muttered one cadet. Alina paused at the finish line, eyes scanning each team member. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest or the strongest," she explained. "It's about clarity, trust, and anticipation. If you fail to listen, adapt, and guide, physical skill alone will not save you." Briggs opened his mouth to respond, but Alina's calm gaze stopped him. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence alone silenced resistance. The lesson was already evident, and the cadets knew it. The exercises continued throughout the morning, escalating in complexity. Cadets had to navigate timed maneuvers, relay critical information under stress, and coordinate as teams while managing unexpected obstacles. Each time, Alina led her team with precision, demonstrating composure and efficiency that contrasted sharply with the chaos of Briggs' group. By mid-afternoon, fatigue began to set in. Cadets were sweating, muscles burning, and frustration mounting. Briggs' attempts at leadership were increasingly frantic, his frustration evident. Alina remained calm, her voice steady, her instructions clear. "Focus on communication. Anticipate. Trust your team," she repeated gently, but each word resonated like a command. Even the strongest, most resistant cadets began to shift. They adjusted their approach, adopting Alina's methods, and found themselves moving more effectively. It was a subtle transformation, but it was happening. The cadets were learning that discipline, clarity, and trust could achieve far more than raw aggression or forceful dominance. During a brief break, Briggs confronted Alina privately. "You make it look too easy," he muttered, frustration and grudging respect mingling in his tone. How do you do it?" Alina didn't flinch. Her gaze was calm, unwavering. "I observe, I adapt, I communicate," she said simply. "Leadership is not about proving who's strongest. It's about creating an environment where others can succeed. If you rely on intimidation, you will always fail to inspire. Your team will falter under pressure." Briggs swallowed hard. He wanted to argue to assert his ego, but the truth was undeniable. Alina had taught a lesson in subtle authority, in skill tempered by control and observation, that he had never encountered. He realized for the first time that he had underestimated her, not only as a cadet, but as a leader. The final exercise of the day was a timed endurance relay, combining obstacle navigation, physical exertion, and team coordination. Briggs' team faltered repeatedly, bickering and miscommunicating. Alina's team, guided by her calm and precise instructions, moved seamlessly, completing the course ahead of schedule, executing maneuvers that were efficient, fluid, and almost effortless. Cadets who had previously mocked her now looked on in awe. Some whispered to each other almost reverently, "She's incredible, a SEAL, we underestimated her." Alina gathered her team afterward, sweat-drenched and breathing heavily yet composed. "Today," she said, "was not about who is the strongest, fastest, or loudest. It was about trust, clarity, and leadership. Remember this lesson. Your ability to lead others under pressure is what defines your strength, not your ability to intimidate or dominate." Briggs, standing at the back, clenched his fists, jaw tight, but he didn't speak. He had learned something vital. Skill and authority were earned through observation, discipline, and integrity, not through arrogance or bullying. Alina had demonstrated that quietly, without theatrics, and the impact was profound. As evening fell over Falcon Ridge, the academy felt different. The cadets' perspective had shifted. The hierarchy of arrogance was challenged. Alina Ward, in her calm, controlled manner, had reshaped the understanding of leadership within Alpha Company. She had proven that strength was multifaceted, combining mental acuity, discipline, and empathy alongside physical skill. In her barracks later, Alina reflected on the day. She had guided, corrected, and observed, cataloging each cadet's reactions, strengths, and weaknesses. The mission wasn't complete. There were still lessons to teach, behaviors to shape, and tests to administer, but progress was evident. Cadets were beginning to understand what it meant to lead under pressure, to trust in their team, and to respect skill without arrogance. Briggs lay awake that night, replaying the day's events. Frustration warred with admiration, but the lesson was undeniable. Alina Ward was no ordinary cadet, no ordinary leader. She was a force beyond comparison, a Navy SEAL whose presence alone had transformed the dynamics of Falcon Ridge Academy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more opportunities to observe, and further lessons in discipline, teamwork, and leadership. And for the cadets, it was becoming painfully clear. Alina Ward was not merely a new girl. She was the standard by which all others would now be measured. The next morning, a sharp wind whipped across Falcon Ridge Academy's training grounds, carrying with it the scent of wet grass and anticipation. Cadets moved in formation, boots pounding against the asphalt, but the atmosphere was electric with tension. Today's challenge was unlike any they had faced before. Lieutenant Commander Alina Ward had designed a test that would push their endurance, mental acuity, and teamwork to the breaking point. The cadets whispered nervously. Rumors of Alina's true identity had spread beyond Alpha Company. Some were in awe, some intimidated, but all were acutely aware that this exercise would be different. The objective was clear: navigate a series of complex, high-stakes simulations under extreme pressure, testing both individual skill and group cohesion. Briggs tried to muster his usual bravado. "We've got this," he muttered to his team, his voice tight. "We just need to follow the plan. Stay strong, move fast, and don't falter." But doubt lingered beneath his confidence. Having seen Alina lead so effortlessly, he knew he was already at a disadvantage. Alina addressed the cadets, her voice carrying authority tempered with calm clarity. Today, you will face challenges that test your resolve, not just your physical abilities. You will encounter unexpected obstacles, environmental stressors, and situations that require trust in each other. Failure is not an option. Observe, communicate, adapt, and persevere. Only those who embrace discipline and teamwork will succeed. The first stage was an endurance navigation course through a densely wooded area behind the academy. Cadets had to traverse uneven terrain, cross streams, and locate markers scattered throughout the forest, all under time constraints. Most cadets struggled immediately. Their movements were frantic, coordination poor, and communication fractured. Alina moved with her team, calm and precise. She guided them through treacherous footing, pointing out safer routes and distributing tasks efficiently. Every instruction was measured, every gesture intentional. She didn't lead by force, she led by example, demonstrating composure under pressure that inspired confidence. Briggs' group faltered repeatedly. Cadets collided with each other, stumbled over routes, and argued over the best path forward. Their frustration mounted, visible in flushed faces and trembling hands. Briggs barked orders, but his authority felt hollow in comparison to Alina's steady presence. Halfway through the course, a sudden downpour began. Rain battered the cadets, turning mud slick and streams into rapid currents. Visibility dropped and morale plummeted. Many began questioning their decisions, fear creeping into their movements. Alina's voice cut through the storm. "Focus, communicate, trust each other," she instructed, her words steady as the wind howled around them. "This is not about speed, it's about resilience, adaptability, and teamwork." Her team responded, moving with cohesion, helping each other across slippery banks, maintaining composure even as fatigue set in. Cadets who had once doubted themselves found courage in her example. Alina's calm confidence became a force multiplier, elevating their performance beyond what they had believed possible. Meanwhile, Briggs' team struggled to stay upright. His attempts to command through force only exacerbated tension, leading to near collisions and miscommunication. Cadets began snapping at each other, panic setting in. Briggs realized that his usual tactics, yelling, intimidation, and brute force, were ineffective against challenges requiring mental clarity and teamwork. The second stage was a mock rescue simulation. Cadets had to locate a wounded team member hidden within the forest and carry them safely across a narrow bridge while under time pressure. Most cadets approached it haphazardly, some panicking, others attempting to act alone rather than as a team. Alina's approach was deliberate. She assessed the terrain, positioned her team strategically, and divided responsibilities according to each member's strengths. She communicated calmly, giving clear instructions, one to support the stretcher, one to clear obstacles, one to navigate the path. When Briggs' team reached the same stage, chaos erupted. One cadet slipped on the muddy ground, nearly toppling the stretcher. Another hesitated, unsure of the instructions. Briggs shouted, but his voice was lost in the storm of confusion. Alina's voice, by contrast, cut through clearly and confidently, guiding her team with precision. By the time both teams completed the simulation, the results were unmistakable. Alina's team had executed flawlessly, moving as a single, cohesive unit, while Briggs' group had stumbled repeatedly, lost precious time, and risked injury. Cadets whispered among themselves, realizing that leadership, composure, and adaptability were far more critical than brute strength or aggression. The final stage was a mental and physical endurance challenge, a nighttime navigation exercise requiring teams to locate multiple markers while carrying heavy packs, navigating obstacles, and maintaining team integrity in darkness. The cadets were exhausted, rain-soaked, and mentally strained. Every decision carried weight. One misstep could cost them valuable time, or worse, result in injury. Alina's team proceeded with calm efficiency. She rotated leadership roles, allowing cadets to make decisions while she guided, subtly correcting errors before they became critical. Her approach fostered confidence and trust. Cadets who had previously doubted themselves now executed maneuvers with precision, relying on one another and communicating effectively. Briggs' team, meanwhile, struggled. Panic flared, miscommunication persisted, and exhaustion overtook their judgment. His frustration mounted as he watched Alina's team excel effortlessly. He realized painfully that his prior methods, domination and intimidation, were insufficient. Leadership required patience, clarity, and the ability to inspire others under extreme stress. By dawn, the exercise concluded. Alina's team emerged victorious, having completed the course with minimal errors and maximum cohesion. Briggs' team followed, bruised, battered, and humbled by the experience. The cadets now understood the true meaning of resolve and the difference between ego-driven actions and disciplined, thoughtful leadership. Lieutenant Commander Ward addressed the cadets, her voice calm yet penetrating. Today was not about winning or losing, she explained. It was about resilience, adaptability, and the ability to function as a cohesive unit under pressure. Physical strength alone is meaningless without mental clarity, trust, and teamwork. Those who fail to learn this lesson will continue to struggle, regardless of skill or training. Briggs swallowed hard, a mixture of embarrassment and respect etched into his features. He had been confronted with his own limitations, forced to witness the power of composed leadership and the importance of teamwork. For the first time, he understood that intimidation and force could never replace genuine skill and insight. The cadets returned to the barracks, exhausted but transformed. Many whispered quietly, replaying the exercises, analyzing their mistakes, and marveling at Alina Ward's effectiveness. She had not only guided them through grueling physical and mental challenges, but had also instilled a deeper understanding of leadership, resilience, and the value of disciplined teamwork. As Alina prepared for rest, she reflected on the day. The mission was far from over. She had observed, corrected, and guided, but there were still lessons to impart, behaviors to shape, and challenges to present. The cadets had faced their first real test of resolve, and while many had struggled, the potential for growth was evident. Briggs, lying awake that night, replayed the exercises repeatedly. Humiliation mingled with a grudging admiration. He had underestimated Alina Ward at every turn and had learned, often painfully, that true leadership required more than ego or strength. Alina had taught lessons he and the cadets would not soon forget. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more opportunities to test the cadets' growth, and the chance to further cement the lessons of discipline, teamwork, and resilience. The academy had been forever changed by Alina Ward's presence, and the cadets now understood the magnitude of the force they were learning from. Falcon Ridge Academy would never be the same, and neither would they. The final day of the training cycle dawned over Falcon Ridge Academy, crisp and clear, yet charged with an unspoken tension. The cadets of Alpha Company had been through grueling weeks of instruction, tests, and lessons in discipline, teamwork, and leadership. But today, Lieutenant Commander Alina Ward had prepared a challenge that would push them to their ultimate limits, the culmination of everything they had learned. Whispers traveled through the ranks. Even Briggs, who had spent days struggling with humiliation and grudging respect, felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. The new girl was no longer a mystery. She was a Navy SEAL, an elite operator, and the very standard against which their abilities would be measured. Every cadet knew that failing this final exercise would not just be embarrassing, it would be instructive in the harshest sense. Alina addressed the cadets from the elevated platform near the training field, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning the crowd with calm authority. "Today's exercise is comprehensive," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "You will face a series of physical, mental, and leadership challenges designed to test everything you have learned. Success depends not on individual prowess alone, but on your ability to trust each other, communicate under pressure, and execute with precision. Only those who internalize these lessons will succeed." The first stage was a combined obstacle and endurance course, more intricate than anything the cadets had attempted. Walls, ropes, nets, and mud pits stretched across the field, while hidden stations required critical thinking and problem-solving under time constraints. Briggs' team, though improved through prior exercises, still faltered occasionally, hampered by lingering ego and residual doubt. Alina's team moved as a cohesive unit, each member anticipating the next obstacle, assisting one another without hesitation, and executing each task with fluid precision. It was a spectacle of coordination, discipline, and controlled power. Midway through the course, a sudden complication was introduced, simulated hazards requiring immediate decision-making. Cadets had to choose between two paths, each with potential consequences. Panic and hesitation overtook many of Briggs' group, while Alina's team assessed quickly, divided responsibilities intelligently, and executed flawlessly. By the end of the course, the difference in performance was unmistakable. Alina's team had not only completed the challenge efficiently, they had demonstrated the full integration of physical skill, mental acuity, and disciplined teamwork. Briggs' team had completed it as well, but with errors, delays, and evident strain, leaving the cadets aware of their limitations. Next came the Leadership Gauntlet, a test designed to isolate individual decision-making and command ability under stress. Cadets were rotated into temporary leadership roles for specific tasks, each evaluated on clarity, communication, and the ability to guide their peers. Briggs struggled initially, his ego clashing with the necessity of delegation and observation. He barked orders rather than instructing, attempted to dominate rather than guide, and failed to anticipate the needs of his team. Alina observed silently, nodding his efforts and calculating how best to teach the final lesson without overt confrontation. When it was Alina's turn to demonstrate, she approached her team with deliberate calm. "Observe the environment, assess capabilities, delegate intelligently," she instructed, her voice steady. She moved fluidly from one cadet to another, demonstrating subtle guidance, correcting without criticism, and maintaining composure even as simulated emergencies arose. Her team responded instinctively, executing tasks with precision, trust, and cohesion. The cadets watched, mesmerized. The difference between fear-driven action and composed, deliberate leadership had never been so apparent. Even Briggs, despite his internal struggle with humility and pride, could not deny the effectiveness of Alina's approach. The final challenge was a night exercise, testing endurance, resolve, and teamwork under extreme stress. Cadets were blindfolded, required to navigate through a simulated hostile environment, locate markers, and carry a heavy wounded team member across treacherous terrain, all while under time pressure and intermittent simulated attacks. Alina's team moved like clockwork. Every instruction was clear, every movement coordinated, every action calculated for efficiency and safety. Trust in one another had been instilled so thoroughly that hesitation was minimal, mistakes rare, and morale unshakable. Briggs' team, however, still struggled. Exhaustion and stress led to minor errors that compounded, miscommunication delayed progress, and lingering ego occasionally caused friction. Yet even they had improved significantly from prior exercises, a testament to Alina's influence. As the exercise concluded, Alina gathered the cadets for a final debrief. Her expression was calm but authoritative, her words deliberate. "What you have learned here is not just about strength, endurance, or skill," she said. "It is about trust, adaptability, and disciplined leadership. Physical ability alone is meaningless without clarity, communication, and cohesion. Those who underestimate these principles will fail in any environment, whether on this training ground or in real-world operations." Briggs, standing slightly apart, clenched his fists but lowered his gaze. He had been humbled repeatedly, confronted with undeniable evidence of his limitations, and forced to learn through observation, failure, and guidance. Alina's presence had reshaped his understanding of leadership, and the lessons would not be forgotten. The cadets of Alpha Company absorbed her words with a mix of awe and respect. They now recognized that Alina Ward was not merely a new girl. She was a benchmark, a teacher, and a force that demanded both skill and humility. Alina walked among the cadets, her gaze meeting each one in turn. She did not need to praise or chastise. Her calm presence conveyed the weight of experience, discipline, and authority. The cadets understood. The lessons of Falcon Ridge Academy were no longer abstract. They had been tested, challenged, and transformed under the guidance of someone who had operated at the highest levels of elite military training. Finally, she addressed Briggs directly, her tone quiet but firm. "You have potential," she said. "But potential is meaningless without humility, observation, and the ability to guide others. Leadership is earned through action, not assumed through position or ego. Reflect on your failures, learn from them, and you may yet become the leader you aspire to be." Briggs swallowed hard. The words stung, yet they resonated with an undeniable truth. For the first time, he saw Alina Ward not as an adversary, but as a mentor whose lessons were delivered with precision, insight, and patience. The final ceremony was simple but meaningful. Cadets stood in formation, rain-soaked, exhausted but transformed. Alina's guidance had left an indelible mark. She had reshaped the academy's dynamics, instilled discipline, and demonstrated the true meaning of leadership and teamwork. As the sun set over Falcon Ridge, casting long shadows across the training grounds, Alina Ward surveyed the cadets one last time. She had taught, corrected, and inspired. Her mission had been completed, not through force, intimidation, or spectacle, but through quiet authority, precision, and the example of true leadership. The cadets had faced their final test of resolve and emerged with a new understanding of strength, discipline, and trust. Briggs, humbled and reflective, recognized the transformative power of mentorship and the importance of learning from those who had truly mastered the art of leadership. Alina Ward, Lieutenant Commander and Navy SEAL, had not just survived the academy, she had changed it. And for the cadets of Alpha Company, the lessons of her presence would echo long after the training grounds had grown silent. As she walked away from the field, her figure silhouetted against the setting sun, the cadets watched silently, a mixture of awe, respect, and inspiration etched into their faces. They had been challenged, they had struggled, and they had learned, and they knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Falcon Ridge Academy would never forget the new girl who had transformed fear into respect, arrogance into humility, and hesitation into confidence. Alina Ward had delivered her last lesson, but its impact would resonate for years to come. The story of the cadets and the Navy SEAL had reached its conclusion, but the legacy of discipline, leadership, and quiet authority she imparted would endure, shaping the next generation of leaders who would face challenges far beyond the academy walls.